My name is Adam Plan. I'm with this company called Win. I'm just curious if has any ever heard of this. I know that Jeff has one of our services, but we're in the Forex business, which means we allow people to trade currency in the same way that you would trade equities. It's kind of taken off a lot over the last 10 to 15 years. It's a $3 trillion a day market. It's relatively young, like I said, 10 to 15 years. We're regulated by a number of different organizations throughout the world, and the regulators are constantly changing the regulations on us, which affects a number of our components, particularly registration. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. In the synopsis that I put on the website, I said I was going to talk about how we got to where we are now. When I was going through stuff with my coworkers, we decided that was useless. And so I'm just going to talk about our current implementation and how it works. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is requirements. So we have three basic types of registration we can have. It can be a corporate entity, which is like a business that wants to hedge their assets or whatever. If you do business in the US, but you're a Canadian company, when you make a sale, you might want to lock in your profit, so you can use one of our APIs to open the opposite position of your sale, and you can save your profits that way. If you're just an individual and you want to trade speculatively, you can have individual accounts. And we also have game accounts, which are play money, just like most of the equities trading houses do. So those three flows are actually interrelated. Corporate and individual are pretty similar. There's regulatory stuff, obviously. If you're a corporation, we don't ask you what your first name is. But we have a lot of stuff shared. So that's kind of what the flows look like. Then we're regulated by currently we're regulated by 4 different regulators. They all have their own sets of rules. So we have the same flow, basically, but we have different questions on all the pages. And then we have 8 languages up to, so far, luckily we haven't had to do any right to lefts yet, but that might be coming. And we definitely have more divisions coming. We're probably going to launch 2 in the next year. So yeah, this can be kind of a complex system. I'm going to talk just about a few more requirements. So when we started working on this project, we were handed, a design from our usability people and our design people, and it was immediately obvious that default rendering from every form package that's out there was not going to be sufficient for this. So we needed to be able to get right under the hood and have full access to all the HTML and all of the JavaScript and CSS and everything to get it to look how they wanted it to look. We also have complicated validation, which is beyond just on a single form. You said yes to this, then you have to answer these questions. Actually, you said yes to this thing a couple of pages ago, so we have a different part of the form that we show here. So we need to be able to accomplish that as well. Dynamic display is what I'm calling. You said yes. Now here's 5 different fields that you need to fill in because you were bankrupt and we didn't know if you could solve them again. And we also need support for Zoom because the flow is so long. Sometimes you might get to the 3rd page and realize that you actually don't know the answer to that question right now. So we wanted to give people the opportunity to explicitly save and come back later. So that was an important thing. We support electronic identification using some 3rd parties like Equifax. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Equifax, but at least in Canada, if you go and you create an account with the government, they give you a quiz and ask you questions about yourself to verify that you actually are who you say you are. Equifax is a provider of a service like that, and we use that to avoid having to ask you for a scan of your passport or a scan of your phone bill or whatever, proof of address. So if you can pass this, then we don't have to do all that stuff. But we also have to support that as well. We have an entire team of about 6 people that all they do is go through all the documents that we get from people that are trying to open up one of these accounts and verify that they're who they say they are, and so on. Okay, so that's, I think, that was the end of the requirements that I had. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. over and above that. So what we use to do this, Catalyst, we use authorization to support the resume flow. So basically, as soon as you start registering, we create an account, and in the background, like a stub account, which is then used to do authorization. Again, so you can come back and resume wherever you want. 8 languages, plug in 18 in. We actually rolled this into it partway through implementation, and it turned out to be really easy. It was a little hair pulling, but it was easy. It was just dumb work to get it to work. And we use session because we have multi-page stage forms and so on. I don't know if you can really write much without using a plugin session. We decided to use HTML FormFu. We started this project in 2009, and Form Handler was about 6 months old at the time. FormFu was started in 2007, and it satisfied our needs. We'd actually stubbed it out using CGI Form Builder, and ran into a lot of issues, and then we stumbled upon FormFu, so we decided to use it. It also natively supports internationalization, and it has ways to do all of the complicated validation stuff that we do, which pretty much all the form packages out there do. And we use TT for rendering, and to support the dynamic display stuff. So if you save a form partway through, and you said yes to one of those questions that make other stuff come up, when you come back and re-log in or you resubmit the form with errors, on the server side, we changed the HTML to render everything opened up instead of doing it just in JavaScript, because it's a little bit of a better user experience for people. So what we built, we have one application that does all of this stuff. I think we have about 8 instances with different configurations that run. And there's one controller for registration flow. The actual pages are implemented with actions. And the actions that are shared are shared through a class hierarchy, which is on the next slide. So that's basically how it works. So base has all of the stuff that's really common. Usual implements the 2 main flows. So the common stuff between individual and corporate, and game, which is only a 2-page form. It's basically like you give us your email address and a password, and you're done. So it just inherits from base. So this is an example of a typical action. It's not really that interesting because all it does is call one method, which is a generic method that handles pretty much everything. This has been simplified. There's a little bit more to it if you look at the production code, but this is basically the core of it. Throw the catalyst object in. For some reason, we can pass in the name of the action. I think we could actually just use C action that can do that, but apparently we're doing it like this for some reason. The URI to the next page of the form, and an initializer for the form. So this is what handle page actually does. We have another shared initialize form function, which that's really probably the most complicated part of this, is getting the right form and the right template to show to a person based on the region that they're in. Everything, all the answers that they've given to us on previous questions could influence the form that they're going to see the next time that they load a page. So I haven't got any of that code in here, but basically what it does is it uses this thing called load config file in FormFu, and we leverage something that I'll talk about on the next slide. So we get a form. We check to see whether they filled it out or not, whether it's valid. If it is, we send it to the next page. If not, we pass it back to TT, and it renders the page. I'll tell you how that actually works in a second. This is also simplified because there's cases where when it's submitted a valid and you're actually done, it goes and does stuff with our backend and so on. So it updates your user, and it gives you counts, gives you money in some cases, and so on and so forth. So this is kind of the magic of getting everything to work right here. So I don't know how many people are familiar with include path in Template Toolkit, but it's pretty cool. It basically lets you give it an array of directories that says, this is where you should load your templates from. Normally people, in my experience, have only given it one directory, and that's where all of their templates are. So what we actually do is we have a hierarchy of directories, and it looks in the first one, and if it's not there, it looks in the second one, and so on and so forth down the list. So we have top level of directories, which basically override templates that are lower down the system. So if we have a template that's specific to just one regulator, then it only resides in that application. And we make heavy use of process within our templates, so our templates are actually, the top level templates are basically a bunch of calls to process for anything that needs to be overridden on a per division basis. And config file path in FormFu works basically exactly the same way. We had to get them to patch it to make it work exactly the same way, but it does now. So that's basically how we get everything to render ready, and have just one single code base to do all of these different forms and all of the different templates, and have it all work great. So this is just an example of we have a financial CT file that is actually overridden in all of our different things because the regulators all want different financial information. So they just fit in all these directories. And if you're on the US instance of the site, then it would look in the US directory first, and then it would look in the default afterwards if you're on the Singapore site and so on. And the FormFu stuff works the same way, it just looks in different directories. And then this is the last thing I was going to talk about. One of my coworkers was really irritated with the way that our logging stuff works, particularly when we get a call from the CSRs that are like, this guy had a problem, we need to like go through the log files and try and figure out what the hell's going on. So he wrote this thing called log defer and log defer bits. And it basically does two things. It defers the logging until after the processing has been completed. So basically you're not delaying getting a response back to clients, just purely as an optimization for page load times, which we care a lot about. And then the other thing it does is actually writes the logs in JSON. So if you look at the actual log files, it's just a mess of a single line JSON. But it allows you to do this cat pipe to grep for the username of the guy who registered, and pipe it to log defer viz, which turns the JSON into this pretty stuff. And there aren't any warnings or errors in here, but they're actually in different colors by default. And you can see the entire, everything that this guy did on the web server in one place. So we can see the entire path that he went through. If he ran into errors, we can trace through exactly what he did. And it's been pretty useful for us from operation. So, that's it. Does anybody have any questions about it?
What color would your be got?
Red.
Good.
And orange or yellow. Okay. Anything else?
What are the benefits of using JSON logs?
I think that log defer actually will support any serialization that you want, but I think the reason that we defaulted to JSON is because in order for the grep part to work, it needs to be one line. So if you want to grep for username, that's the other thing is that normally in your application you call your like log method 50 times potentially in the history of requests or during that code path, and normally you might print out the username a couple of times in there. So if you grep, you get like those couple of lines. Because we're logging everything from the entire request on one line, if you ever say the username, you get the entire log output from that entire request. So that when you have gigantic log files, that can be particularly helpful.
Did you look at any other web frameworks besides Alice?
Not really. We actually were learning Alice when we started this, so we used Answer at work as well too for some other stuff, and we used Mojo for a few things as well. But yeah, when we started this project, we kind of were just like, well, everything, like we've been using Perl for many years. I've been there for 5, and when I walked in and I looked at the code base there, like that was the first time I'd seen backtick as a delimiter from Perl 4. So that was the stuff that we were looking at. We had like a homegrown template engine. We had a homegrown like pseudo framework kind of thing. And we were like, okay, we're going to be able to write this from scratch. Like we can use all these great tools that are out there. So we kind of just grabbed Catalyst at the time. It was probably the most so much.